It starts staying up at 6:20.
And pants on too on the grass.
I was gonna go in my underwear, but wait, we're alive. Never mind.
Save that for the Zoom.
Let's try to get everyone on camera. That should do it.
Yeah, that works.
That'll get everybody.
CC.
Just CC.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
You like that, Master? Use that.
Amazon for 90 cents.
It's the invisible.
And you can hose it off.
Invisible mask.
CDC says it's okay, but they change their mind every day.
The new one that they're recommending starts at your neck and goes up instead of the ones that come down.
Yeah.
You remember when you get your dog, right? You know, your dog goes, but it's foot with control on.
Yeah.
That's next.
Yeah, you're right.
There was gonna have a dog come.
In case it dies on me.
Oh, yeah.
Can you plug that in?
Yeah.
That one. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All of the
Oh,
yeah.
Goes out of a couple of those.
Hello.
You got a note from Scott.
Yeah, we'll read that out in public session when it comes to public comment.
Okay.
We have 5 minutes for entertainment.
Oh. You recorded?
Oh, thank you.
This is a PDF.
Okay, let's go through it. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks. This is just pre-game entertainment.
Is that the drone?
Game entertainment.
Yeah. It's the pre-show, the pre-game show.
Once upon a time.
Is that the drone?
Yeah, that's from,
Oh, there's a drone for that?
yeah, from Graham Real Estate. We asked them to just,
Goes to hell.
Yeah.
Need to bury power lines.
You want to pay for it?
These guys will. What is up, Paul? Is this Jordan with that?
No,
Guy
I
was
use
married
less than that.
yesterday in Boston, he tested positive this morning.
My USB peak in between trees.
I don't know, when or if we're going. Yeah, I'm going to New York to get tested.
Yeah, we can post these, I think that's, yeah, that's where you are, right? Yeah.
So Jordan
Right,
said we
here's
should
you.
try to
Yeah.
drive it. It's 16 hours. And what, Saturday? Sure. Let's go.
I think about it at 30 total.
Where are
Good, good dollars.
you? Yeah.
I don't want to turn anyone away, so that's why I put K-Flip.
So it could be almost 4 hour tests. We're gonna real blood test on Thursday morning.
This is basically the song. Yeah. So you can see between the width, but that's about it. And now we're coming up to K for events.
2433.
This is K's house. And now you're here.
You don't have 4 days.
It's a lot of cables, a lot of utility lines.
He was exposed.
Yeah.
It's here, it says no.
We're still west of state here.
No,
What
no.
was the
Yeah,
motion?
this is by Harrison, I think. I think.
Maybe the other guy was John, I don't know.
There's the hill right there. So
Yeah.
This is the basement. She's
His
just-
brother just got married in the bar, right? I think he's thinking right now, that's what, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's about it.
Oh, I think I'm gonna- So, yeah.
That's probably driveway.
Jim Raymer is joining.
Hi, Joe.
Is that Matt?
It is.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
I got it, I'm right there. No one brought popcorn for this show? Look at this.
I didn't know we were having a video show.
Victor, where is this? Now where are you? Because I lost kind of track of where it is.
Now we're headed west on the West Bluff.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's State
Yeah, I got it now.
From a higher elevation.
Should be able to do it just normal.
That's here.
Because it won't show up.
Next time you guys will have roles. Next time you'll have roles in the video, whatever video is next.
We always have roles.
That's true.
All right, 7 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. All rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very quick.
John Cox. Here.
Chad Leo. Here. Matt O'Gara.
Here.
CC Johnston.
Yeah.
And Mike Naturkis. We do have a quorum.
Good. We have some minutes from our last meeting. You want to review them?
I read through them, I didn't notice any corrections that needed to be made, so barring other comments, I make a motion to approve.
Turkus, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. And the bill committee?
My bills are good.
I found one discrepancy, so we're just excluding that from the run, and excluding that one, I would make a motion to pay the rest.
Second. I'll second it. All in favor of paying the bills?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. Anyone here for citizens' comment for something that's not on the agenda? And if you are, please state your name and address.
My name is Jill Whalen and I live at 5244 4th Street underneath the bluff. And it's relatively close to where the Bulmeless Hill comes down, and people are still firing down that street. At 25 miles an hour, I think it's too high of a speed limit because people tend to go 25 or just a little bit over. So, I mean, we've talked about this before, but nothing's ever happened, so I just thought I'd bring it up again.
Very good. Ask the chief about it. Honorable Moose Hill, more patrols.
We've been down there, I've actually spent about 3 hours sitting down there, stationary radar. Officer Johnson's been down there. Our speed time, I'm gonna pull it and get the data, so we'll have that report. We added a 25 mile an hour sign in Mr. Avis's yard, going for westbound. So we are taking enforcement action down there. And I can bring the documentation of every time we sit down there. We're not getting speeders, but our tolerance is 5 to 10 over. And we can sit down there for an extended period of time and we do not get speeders going above 35 miles an hour. So I will keep on it. I understand your concern and we'll keep.
I think it's too high of a speed limit to begin with. I don't know if it could be changed to 15 or something.
That would be very difficult to do because we would be doing that throughout the city. I feel like if we were to lower that, we'd also have to lower a lot of speeds throughout the city. I understand your concern, but that would be something that the council would have to take up as far as lowering the speed limit. That's just, but we have been monitoring, I'll tell you that, because I've sat down there myself for over 2 hours. And I know Officer Johnson's been very diligent about it. And so we're gonna gather the data from our sign.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Any other citizens' comment?
On this topic?
Any topic that's not on the agenda? Any citizens' comment on the phone? Perfect. Anything on the internet?
We have a YouTube comment. Scott Reese commented and said he read everything but the fine print in the packet tonight. Should be a lot of fun. Great job to all involved in the research.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. If there's no other citizens' comment, we can move on to the city manager section.
I would just like to make one adjustment to the city manager's section, and that is to do the manager's report and city council new and old business before we go into closed session. Okay, so the first agenda item is a request for an event on public property, which is the chamber was planning on doing sidewalk sales, and I believe Executive Director Bonnie Culp is here to kind of further explain whether that's going to go ahead or not. So Bonnie, if you want to go.
Yeah, so, I don't know if it's easier for me to stand.
Yeah, please stand, yeah.
Okay. Bonnie Culp, the Executive Director of Chamber of Commerce. Actually, I submitted a request to have sidewalk sales last week. And due to developments since then, and also speaking with others and rethinking, I am not positive that we can assure people's safety. And so I think that the chamber probably we will not go forward with requesting sidewalk sales. That being said, we will then reach out to our members to help promote indoor sales and things like that, but I just don't know that we can do it safely and assure that people will social distance and wear masks.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second agenda item is a request to locate electric utilities underground. We have Electric Supervisor Dan Huey here in attendance to explain if you have any further questions. But basically, we have two requests to bury electric utilities underground per our policy that was formed in 2007. And in this policy, that cost all is shifted toward the property owners requesting it. But this first step is going to council just to see if council wants us even to pursue this, because there is some engineering that we have to do first on our end. But we know this is a stated goal of council. Obviously, it's a very electric utilities. So if council approves of this, essentially gives us a go ahead, what we'll do is we'll get the preliminary costs and engineering specs for what needs to happen, provide that to the people requesting it. And if they agree to take on the cost and do the project, then they will pay for that, and we will bring up the final designs and final plans back to council so council can approve the work that's going to be done. Usually, sometimes we contract it out if it's a large project to someone, but in this case, I believe we feel our guys are confident that our guys are able to do these projects themselves, so we wouldn't need to go out to bid. So Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now it's just a recommendation. There's not approval of it, just recommending us to go ahead with pursuing this. So if I can get a vote, just vote on that.
Following the policy, I would proceed.
It makes sense for where they're asking to do it, doesn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I got the map up there. Sorry. That's the one on Penn Ave, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
perfect sense, yeah. The right people are involved, so.
Can we get a vote on that, Nick?
I need a motion, I would move that we approve the request.
I'll second it.
John Cox?
Yep.
Mike Turkis?
Yep.
John Leo?
Yes.
CC Johnston?
Yes.
And Matt McGarrett?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda, which I believe most people are here for, is the Bluff Vegetation Management presentation. So before we start, we did as you can tell, a lot of research. There's a lot of information in this packet. When Mr. Raymer and his partner did a lot of research on the legal side, and we didn't know where this was going to end up with all the research, but kind of came. The research, I think, speaks for itself, but I'm still going to go through the entire presentation. I won't get into super specifics unless council has questions on the specifics. And then obviously you can open it up to the public for any comments after that. So just bear with me as I go through this presentation. And if you want to wait for questions till the end, unless you need a specific clarification, I'd appreciate that. Can we have them mute?
Someone on the phones needs to mute their phone, please. Hey, John?
I think you did it, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so let me just get this a little more legible. Are you still?
Well, someone who's.
I've been trying to get on YouTube and I've not been successful.
Okay. You need to mute your phone, John, because we can hear your background noise. Someone who's on the phone needs to mute.
Okay, I'm on the phone now and I've turned off YouTube.
Okay,
Okay.
that should work. All right, so the first part of this presentation is ownership, city ownership of land, so West Bluff. So right now you see the parcels that we own, or we assumed we owned at one point on West Bluff. This is State Street, Harrison Street, all the way to Ann Street, and then there's this large chunk right here. So parcel 200,079, which is this large parcel right here, that parcel the city definitely owns. The state of Michigan deeded that to us in 1941. It can only be used solely for park purposes. If it's used for anything other than a park purpose, it reverts back to the state of Michigan. There are no homes below it, so it tends to be not as much of a contentious issue when trimming happens on that part of the bluff. The other parcel is this parcel right here between Ann Street and State Street. That parcel, the city likely does not own it. And this bluff section, also known as Bluff Park, was incorporated into the city in 1881 when it was then the village of Little Traverse. The original owners, Southard and Crandall, originally dedicated the streets and alleys of that plat for public use, but the Bluff Park was not dedicated for public use. The only mention of the Bluff Park was that it would not be laid out into lots for obvious reasons that you can't have homes on the bluff. So based on that fact, that it was not specifically dedicated to the city as the streets and alleys were, we never had ownership of that. But I'll get into that a little bit more now. So Mr. Raymer, and he's on the line here, and his partner at their law offices did extensive research, title work, legal research, and case law. And it is with the background work that they discovered, the city granted a small right-of-way easement to the state. This was back in the 1930s, I believe, of that Bluff Park portion. But the city cannot produce the title to Bluff Park or show that it was dedicated to us. So the question then is, how can we perform or approve vegetation management on something we don't own? As historically requested by the 4th Street property owners, the city has exercised regulatory control of trimming on Bluff Park. This happened in the late 1980s when homeowners below the bluff requested that the city intervene with the trimming that was going on from above the bluff. So what the city says is, okay, we will get involved in exercising control over it on behalf of the people below the bluff. The owners of the lots contained within the original 1881 plat, which there's exhibits and maps of in this document, are more than likely the owners of that Bluff Park, and they have a revocable easement for the use of Bluff Park. That is our legal conclusion based on Mr. Raymer's memo, and after this presentation, if you have more questions for him, he definitely will be able to answer those. So what does this mean for ownership? Well, it's probably likely that the plat property owners should organize some sort of property owners group that would decide on whether or not they will allow property owners above the bluff to remove trimmed trees on the Bluff Park. They should also seek legal counsel. It's not advice, but that's just my recommendation. In the interim, the city should continue exercising regulatory control as historically asked for by 4th Street property owners to prevent tree trimming removal trespasses on Bluff Park if that's direction they want us to go. The city would not be involved in controlling or managing trimming, tree removal, and stabilization on Bluff Park should the plat owners desire to allow above the bluff owners to trim trees. The city could provide historical and current documentation on bluff management practices to the plat owners so they can develop their own plan, should they so choose. And the plat owners could also decide to dedicate Bluff Park to the city, and the council could decide whether or not they want to accept that property as city-owned property. I know that's a lot of information to take in right now, but that is where we are at as far as ownership. Then there's the East Bluff. We really don't own much property on the East Bluff. There's this one parcel here just east of State Street, and there's another parcel, it's called the Shade Drain. These are relatively, there's a little more contention sometimes with this part, my State Street, but Shade Drain, the homeowners around there have been pretty good at deciding before the fact, before applications happen, on what kind of trimming should happen there. So as you saw, we played a video earlier of some views from above the bluff, and so we just have a few more here, one from below the bluff in the wintertime when it's obviously the least aesthetic pleasingly view. So there's been so historically now going into the disagreements, and this is all pretty obvious to most people, but the above the bluff perspective has been that they've wanted to maintain or improve their views of Little Traverse Bay. That's why they live above the bluff or on the bluff. But it's becoming impossible or difficult to perform reasonable tree trimming, at least on West Bluff. The below the bluff perspective is primarily concerned with safety and environmental issues associated with the vegetation management requests, such as erosion and the stability of the bluff. And also wooded bluff in their backyards is more aesthetically appealing compared to the results of the past practices that happened several decades ago of clear cutting. So those are very generalized, but you guys know those issues those are the two big issues. So when you look to the master plan, what does the master plan say? Well, the master plan kind of favors tree trimming pretty heavily, actually. It says Harbor Springs is a community of views and vistas that frame Little Traverse Bay. Harbor Springs is defined by its waterfront settings, substantial bluffs, and views of the Little Traverse Bay. Harbor Springs will be a quaint community with amazing views. And we should revise our regulations to foster design which minimizes obstruction of views. The greatest natural resources that we have are our views of Little Traverse Bay and Lake Michigan, and then sensitive sand dunes. So the intent of this future land use designation is to preserve the character of the neighborhoods and the views for the enjoyment of residents and visitors alike. A primary objective of this plan is to retain the views historically enjoyed from upgrading properties. There is some talk about the bluff and stability. There's acknowledged that there's potential for soil erosion and damage to downgradient properties and that would happen if the bluff was altered substantially. And so the plan intended for the bluff to be protected from development. And usually what we mean by development is any kind of structure. And also regards to what to do with the bluff, especially the West Bluff, the master plan called for a landscape plan, which is obviously different than a bluff management plan. A bluff management plan is looking at the stability versus a landscape is looking at aesthetics primarily. So just as a comparison, summary here, importance of the views of Little Traverse Bay is emphasized several times. The bluff should not be developed by construction of residential or commercial buildings, and we do have zoning into effect for private and public bluff properties. And trees are hardly mentioned in the master plan. It's just a note of caution here, this master plan was from 2014, but even some of this language was inserted in that before 2014. And we are going through a master plan review process right now, so this could change, may change. I'm not going to speak for the public process, but it may change based on future input that you'll see that in this presentation. So we went to the Tree Advisory Board. They are opposed to any policy or plan that manages the bluff through individual requests. They agree that there should be a bluff management plan that allows for flexibility on different sections of the bluff. So shade drain, East Bluff versus the contested part of the bluff versus the far western part of the bluff. The plan should be crafted by certified professionals with input from the public. And the main priority should be the bluff stability. The secondary objective should be aesthetics. And that's could be views of the bay or views looking up at the bluff from the water or from the properties down below. So then we did a public survey on the bluff management and what the public thought and what they felt their primary objective should be. And I tried to be as objective with my questions as possible to get a different feel, but of course, it's always hard to nail down exactly what questions you need to answer or ask. But we had 177 responses, which was pretty good. The primary overwhelming concern is ensuring this bluff stability and preventing erosion and runoff. 94% of the respondents said that the city should have a bluff management plan. 15% said that the city should solely be responsible for those costs, while 41% stated that the city should be solely responsible for improving bluff stability. Basically, I got out of that is if we're maintaining the bluff just to have views, the city shouldn't be paying for it. But if we're maintaining the bluff for stability reasons, then there's more of a mixed reaction on what the city's financial role should be in that. 75% stated that a certified arborist should be involved in making decisions regarding tree trimming. And I include that because I had a list of different options of who should be involved, and overwhelmingly a certified arborist was listed as the number one person who should be involved. And if we're continuing with a policy or a version of a policy that we have now, 85% believe that an applicant for a tree trimming request should hire their own certified arborist to create a report subject to city approval. And 80% said that those who disagree with such a report should hire their own professional to appeal such a decision. So these are just questions to gauge the public's input, just to kind of help me frame some of what I thought originally was going to be some of what our questions would be for tonight before we got to the ownership bit. So what are the city's options for the bluff property we do own or may own? And when I say may own is if there's that hypothetical that the people below the bluff would like to dedicate that property or we pursue to get that contested portion of the property as our own. I'll go through these really quickly, but option one, there's 3 versions of option one, and they all revolve around revising the current policy that we have. So at first, a light revision would be requiring the arborist report to be more specific in the exact number and location of trees to be removed. Define the notification radius. Before we had a notification radius, it just said all adjoining neighbors, but giving some sort of feet radius is how we do it with planning commission applications. So it just seems reasonable. Clarify our goals and objectives, and then state that the city's arborist cannot perform the vegetation management on said property to deal with any conflict of interest. The second option, or option B for option one, would be that same revision plus requirements that applicants hire a certified arborist to create a report that is then reviewed by our own city arborist. City manager will still solicit public opinion, but the application will only go to council if neighbor property owners submit their own opinion as a rebuttal, a professional opinion as a rebuttal. And then option 1C would be allow residents below the bluff to submit plans to plant vegetation or help stabilize the bluff. And applicants would be required to submit a fee and would be financially responsible for any work performed. As you see, based on our survey results, there was more contention about whether we should go that route with this, but definitely with people who want to improve their view, the cost should be on those who want to improve their view. So this has a more of a mixed response on that one. Option 2 really is just to do nothing. City will let nature take its course and only trim trees that are hazardous, those that could jeopardize city infrastructure or private homes on private property. But this option doesn't really mesh well with the master plan's goal of creating views of Little Traverse Bay. And also letting nature take its course may not necessarily be the best route for stabilizing the bluff. And we also may see an increase in protests of tax values if views are lost due to lack of trimming. Option 3, if for the parts that we do own or may own, sell the bluff. It's not conventional, but you can sell it to those who are willing to pay, get it off the city's hands. City zoning regulations will still apply, meaning development is prohibited, but the city wouldn't be involved in any disputes about trimming on that property. But in order to sell the land, the city charter states that the council must approve it. City residents then must approve that sale on a ballot, by ballot, and then the land would be auctioned off to the highest bidder. We also obviously can't sell the parcel that was deeded us to the state because the state said we have to maintain that as park use. So really, we're only talking about a parcel or two that we could potentially sell if we get ownership or were to have ownership of the one between Ann and State Street, then we could potentially sell that as well. But I don't see why we would seek ownership just to sell ownership. It doesn't make sense, but we can talk about that later. But there still would be a problem of fair and sensible management of the bluff. But is it our problem as with East Bluff? Most of East Bluff is privately managed, and obviously there are some concerns with the people below the East Bluff have with trimming above the bluff, but it's just not within our hands. So we just leave it be. Option 4, landscape plan. As mentioned, this is called for in the master plan. It's different than the management plan because it primarily focuses on aesthetics. It would be much more expensive than a bluff management plan, several hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on if we want to terrace it and depending on what the process for what type of vegetation we want to remove and place there. But if you incorporate a landscape plan into a bluff management plan over a long-term period, it could prove stability as well as aesthetics. So that's one thought. Option 5 would seem to be the most popular option is a bluff management plan. The city would create a plan that isn't dictated or influenced by individual requests. It would include the city council, professional experts, staff, as well as public input. And the aim would be to fulfill the city's primary objectives, which council would determine, but based on public feedback and previous information, it's stability and views are the two objectives that we talk about a lot. How much will it cost? Well, for the part that's city owned, plus Bluff Park, which is not city owned, there's a total of 2,200 feet of frontage. If we minus Bluff Park, there's about 1,200 feet of frontage. At an average cost, this is a little high, being conservative, but $1,000 for 15 feet of frontage. Entire bluff, you're talking about $150,000 almost, or if it's just the parts we own, $80,000. What's included in those costs? Planning and assessment of the area, actual trimming, planting of new vegetation, and safe removal of those trees and vegetation from the site if that's what's needed. So costs could be spread out over a period of time. And each year the city could focus on a specific section. We could split it into 10 different sections and do, one section each year. Or we can allocate a certain amount of money each year to bluff management and then see how far that takes us each year. Who will pay? Likely would be general fund, but there present all options. You could always do a special assessment for those above or below the bluff, or you could do a combination of the two, of the general fund dollars and special assessment. Sorry, this is a smaller font here. This is available online as well, so for those of you who want to read this afterwards. A plan could consist of, first, we potentially create a committee that would include residents, board members and staff and professional experts to determine what our goals are and then how we get those goals. Some things that after talking with some professionals, including our arborists, some issues we always run into is the larger trees usually mean fewer trees, which also means larger tracts of uncovered area due to shaded area, which contributes to runoff. So we would also want a mix of small trees with smaller canopy. We would need multiple size plant species. But if we do nothing, Norway maple and box elder will regenerate and they are decay prone. There's also the problem of deer. They don't just eat food on the bluff. They also use the bluff as a corridor. So we could plant deer resistant food, but the deer are still going to come anyway because they use the bluff to get down and up the hill. Brush slows down deer movement. And so if we remove the brush, then we're increasing deer speed, which increases soil runoff. So essentially, we must reduce the canopy height, have a variety of species and sizes of trees, and not let the trees get too old based on, as you'll see, we had other management reports several years ago that have said similar things. But then we still have the issue of rainwater coming from M119, the question of curbing and guttering M119, and the city working with the state to make sure the water is not flowing over the bluff to cause the washouts. So the water flowing over the bluff is the primary cause, and the weaker stability of ground cover and roots you have, then it's more likely the washouts will lead to further problems. So the primary, in my opinion, the primary is diverting the water from the bluff elsewhere. Or option 6 is stay the course. In 2009, Northern Environmental Services performed a hydrogeological study of West Bluff. 2011, the city's contracted arborist, Ben Vealing, did a detailed bluff management plan. And our current policy stems from both of those documents with some additional changes in, I think, 2018. So do we need a new study or new plan? Is there something deficient with the ones from a decade ago? The 2009 study said that we should complete tree removal in stages, selecting those in least vulnerable places first. And that is if we wanted to achieve the objective of improving views while keeping the bluffs stable. We should leave the roots of removed trees intact. The reasoning for this is that the roots will decay over time, but as we leave them intact, as we plant ground cover, it'll allow the ground cover to create a more stable soil structure as those roots decompose. So the first step would be plant ground cover such as hydro seeding, grass, seed mats to prevent rain from washing away the soil. Then you would plant shrubs and saplings and not remove the smaller, healthier trees so they can help keep the soil stabilized. Based on that 2009 study, as well as his expert opinion, our certified arborist, Ben Vealing, said the primary purpose of the bluff management is first to ensure stability of the bluff, and then to expand views of the bay if possible. The two key observations he made at that time were the previous bluff management with topping and little ground cover is what created erosion problems to begin with. Areas that had the least erosion had different size plants present. So tall, short, medium, shrubs, grass, etc. The bluff management plan called for the selective removal of trees as monitored. The removal should not exceed 20%, and that 20% number was based on the natural mortality rate of trees in a forest stand. And tree removal should be based first on safety, then location, and then possible advancement of view. The idea would be to prevent any clear cutting and then chip small removed branches to be used as nutrients for future plant cover. So this was the 2009 and 2011 study and bluff management plan, and those documents are in your packet. So basically, to conclude, what are the options? What are the questions that council has to, I guess, contend with? First is, if the city does not own Bluff Park, which we, based on Mr. Raymer's opinion and my opinion, is we don't have ownership of Bluff Park, is there a point to having a bluff management plan when the most contested parcel cannot be controlled by the city? Do we want to have create a bluff management plan for Shea Drain and that little small section on East Bluff, and then that big section on West Bluff where there's no property owners below it? That's one question. As you notice, there's not many issues on the publicly owned bluff land. Does the policy still need to be altered? Even though it might be deficient in some regards, is this policy still okay for the Shea Drain and the other parcel of land that we have? Does the city want to control the contested area? And by contested, I mean between the above the bluff and lower bluff, if it was dedicated to the city. So if the below the bluff property owners came back and said, listen, we want to dedicate this to the city for you guys to maintain and preserve, would the city council consider taking that up? And then a small question that can't be answered now, but it's a future question to think about is, does Bluff Park now go on the tax roll? Being that this whole time has been public, or we thought it was public, and so it's never been on the tax roll, and so that's a question that comes to mind. But okay, let's assume that Bluff Park now is dedicated. Let's just make that assumption. We're not going to say it's happening, but what to do next then? What option do we go with? How much money is the city willing to spend and can spend? What is the fairest policy, and what public interest are we trying to achieve? So as you remember, the options I provided with you as a summary are: do nothing, let the land, the bluff grow as is, and let what happens happen, sell it, choose between different levels of edits to the existing policy, do a landscape plan, or a bluff management plan, or some combination of the two, or stay the course with the hydrogeological study and the 2011 bluff management plan that was put in place. So that is my summary of all the research that Mr. Raymer, I, and other city staff have done. Jeff, Andy Potter, Mr. Raymer, they did a lot of work reading through minutes, giving me feedback, and it's took longer than I anticipated, but I think we got to the right answer, even though it's not the most pleasant answer for some. But I guess I'll leave it open now for council first for questions, and Mr. Raymer's on the line as well to answer some of the more in detail legal questions.
Who goes first?
Nice job with the research. Man, this is thorough.
Thank you.
Long overdue, but well done.
Thank you.
There's not really much for us to talk about at this point.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a lot for council to talk about until the issue of what the owners want to do with this piece of land.
So there's that, or we have that original plat that was in there, and so the owners, there's a question about who would be who have equal rights or revocable rights to that land. It's all those people that have properties that derive from that original plat. We can make that available to the people below the bluff. It's not just the 4th Street people, it's and to Church Street, 4th and 3rd, so there's quite a few. And I would recommend them getting legal counsel to decide on how they would proceed.
Ask one question.
Well, let's keep it for the council first, and then
Until someone decides what to do with Bluff Park, I don't think there's any decision we can really make. I think, the one thing I would say, the moratorium we put on turning on city property, we could probably lift that. The Shea Drain people seem to have that all worked out. That one little sliver going up West Hill has never really been an issue.
Given the overall uncertainty, I would suggest let's leave the moratorium in place. Let's just not do anything. Let's freeze until we can come. Well, a lot of these questions and answers to me are intertwined. Do we need a management plan that replaces the current policy? I believe we do. Whatever property the city owns should be managed by the city. And we should have a plan to do that that is not predicated, just like the tree board came up with, should not be predicated on individual requests.
Well, we did have a management, or we do have a management plan that's been in place since 1981.
1993 was the original
But
plan.
it's that, the
And
premises for that is individual requests for permit.
Right.
And I'm against that as a premise for management plan on city property.
yes. But, you know, in the Shade Drain, they have put together their own association. And they get together and they decide how they would like to see that managed.
Do they have any pending requests?
They did not put a pending request in because they were waiting for the moratorium to be lifted, but they did meet and they did discuss what they agreed to do.
And they do it to improve views for themselves. There's no property owners below them that are affected.
Then I would make that an exception to the moratorium, but I would not continue the existing policy that's predicated on individual requests. That's my opinion.
Anyone else have
Anyone
any?
else?
I agree with that.
So it's just the shader, and it's just that one little section, and then that little sliver, and you're gonna stop those people from improving the city's views because you don't want anyone to cut trees.
That's not, Matt, that is not at all what I said. I said the city needs a plan to manage city property, and I don't believe it is appropriate.
Manages city property.
Well, what's coming down to is the property we think are own or don't own is the problem. Shade Drain area, State Road and Shade Drain area are,
Not a problem.
they're not a problem. And the other end of town, it's all swamp, doesn't make any difference right now.
Well, we can't, it's a park.
So I would agree that we can lift the moratorium for this end down here. We still have a question of Ann Street to State Street. So I leave the moratorium for that area right now until we get some stuff figured out, but lift it for,
Well, we don't own that, so we can't do anything there. anyway.
Well, part of her presentation was to continue to exercise control over it, prevent any cuttings to occur until this issue is resolved.
Well, it could be years before they come up with a plan with what they want to do, and it's
Okay.
gonna hold up the rest of
We just,
the people.
I think we all agreed, let's let Shade Rain do what they have done successfully in the past and remain on hold for the rest of it. We need a new policy. One man's opinion. We need a plan, not a policy. It should not be driven by individual requests. It should be the responsibility and authority of the city.
I'll make a motion that we lift the moratorium on tree cutting on at Shade Park, or Shade Drain, and sliver from State, east of State Road.
I'll second.
I'm just showing you guys where that's at. That's this sliver right here and Shade Drain right here. Then this would all stay, even this, all this would be within the moratorium.
All right, I have a motion by Eric Viera,
Second, Michael.
second by Cobbs. And I'll do a roll call, C.C. Johnston.
Yeah.
John Leo,
Yes.
John Cobbs.
Yes.
Mike Petracas.
Yes.
Matt Viera.
Yeah.
Motion carried.
So I guess then the next part of this discussion is opening to the public for comments or questions about, yeah. So I'll just put as a reminder our recently approved rules for citizen comments. We do have a 3-minute rule for speaking. I don't think people are going to speak too long, but
We'll be casual tonight.
so mayor will address who, yeah.
Sure.
My name is Sam Quick. I live at 250 West Bluff. I'm a year-round resident. My son goes to the high school here. One thing, Victor, that I would like to sort of reply to that you said, I don't think that the folks on West Bluff are looking at it from just the aesthetic perspective. In fact, I would tell you that most of the folks on West Bluff absolutely realize that the stability of the bluff is more important than you. We all realize that. We're all neighbors. We want to do the right thing. So I think I had a whole lot of notes that I planned to kind of talk about and go through, but as we've gone through the presentation, I really stepped back sort of to one thing, which is that ownership of Bluff Park. And as I read the documents that Victor made available online, it isn't clear to me. I understand kind of the opinion is that the folks on 4th Street or below potentially will own Bluff Park, but it isn't clear to me that that's legally true. And I would ask that the council really looks at that and figures out from a legal perspective who owns Bluff Park and what we do with it going forward. Because I would contend that potentially the city does own that property, or there are some heirs to the people originally that property was granted to that own that property. It's not owned by anybody below the bluff. And I think, again, I had a lot of other notes, but based on the presentation and what was said, I think those are the key factors for me, is I believe that Bluff Park is still, ownership is still in question. It's not definite, and I think it would not be prudent on the city's part to do something with it, not knowing for sure who the rightful owner is. Thank you.
Council, I'd just like to clarify that our attorney did an extensive memo on that and has found that we do not own it. That's a legal opinion. It's not just an opinion. So I just want to clarify that's there. And Mr. Raymer is.
I don't think he's saying that. He's saying that he knows you don't own it. He's saying that the people on 4th Street do not own it.
And he's saying, excuse me.
Ownership is unclear. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Based on our legal opinion, ownership is clear, and it's the people below the bluff in that original plat. And I don't, Mr. Raymer, if you want to ask him to elaborate, but that's up to you, Mayor.
I say, do you have any quick comments, Jim?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think the issue of ownership is not quite as murky as it would appear. There was a Michigan Supreme Court decision in the 1930s involving a platted subdivision that had streets and roads and parks in it, where the streets and roads were dedicated to the public, and the plat was silent as to ownership of the park. And there was a case brought by one of the heirs of the original platters of the park. And the court decided that the lot owners within the plat had an irrevocable easement in that property, and the owner, the heirs of the owner did not have substantial rights to do anything with that park. So, and there was no dedication of it to the public, therefore the municipality did not have control. So that case, I believe, is dispositive of the issue insofar as the city's ownership is concerned. And we kind of double confirmed that by searching all of the records of the early years involving the village of Little Traverse and the city of Harbor Springs. And there was no deed ever recorded to this property to the city. Interestingly, there was a deed from one of the original owners, Souther, to the city for a small area on the north side of State Street, that portion of Bluff Park, but nothing on the main portion of Bluff Park between State Street and Ann Street. So there's just nothing there that gives an ownership interest to the city.
Right.
The bottom line was that in the 1980s, all all of practically every owner below the bluff and many above the bluff petitioned the city to take over management. And the city reluctantly did that. And that policy continued until, well, within the last 10 or 15 years, when people below the bluff began to object to the cutting that was being approved. And in my view, that permission to the city to manage the cutting on the bluff has been effectively terminated, the permission to do that, and therefore I don't think the city should be involved.
All right, thank you.
I understand the city doesn't own it, but it doesn't.
My question
Go ahead,
to the attorney is, of this plat that's been laid, does it show that the 4th Street people own the land that's part of Bluff Park? Or do they just have the right of way to use it?
They have the right to control it and use it.
Then they should be paying taxes on it then.
Well, this is an argument that has been also brought before the courts in many cases, and the argument is an argument on one side of it is they're already being taxed on it because when you buy a lot in a flat, that's a right that you get, and the market is telling you that's what the price is. That's what the value of that interest is. Now, there's another side to that argument, of course, and that's something that will have to be considered by the city assessor as we go forward.
Now, if they did a survey on their property, their survey today ends right where Bluff Park starts. So the plat, if they had the survey of their total property, they would go up to the points where they are in the north, on the very north side of Bluff Park. Is that true?
No, it's
No.
not true.
So Mayor, on the screen is the image of the plat. So all, the Bluff Park is in the yellow. All the property owners between Ann Street and Church Street, on 4th Street to 3rd Street, all of them would have an equal vested interest in ownership control of this Bluff Park, like a sort of common ownership, like a condo association. So the people on 4th Street don't just have rights to this property. It's everyone that was in this original plat and any descendants of any splits that happened from those. So anyone who owns property on this plat has equal rights to that. That's our legal determination.
Anyone else? Mr. Harris?
Wayne Avis, 476 4th Street. Victor, you've had some discussions with MDOT. They're a third owner who we've not spoken about. They own, West Bluff. They maintain it. Their opinion on the washout was that it was actually the water coming down off of Harrison Street that caused the washout, the massive amounts. But what the question is, what is their response? And I know you have it in your packet, but as city council and as the audience aware, it's page, I think, 66. If you could elaborate on your discussions with them.
So at this point, are you talking regarding ownership?
No, remember the MDOT is Michigan Department of Transportation.
Right, I know. So what is
What
their
they want to
response?
see happen to the bluff since they have to maintain.
So they made a comment that they would not like to see the trees trimmed because they believe if the trees are trimmed, the roots will eventually die, which would cause further erosion. However, they didn't consider the fact that trimming could be associated with planting, which would, as the roots decay, you would plant more ground cover and shrubs, which would then further stabilize that. They also avoided, I haven't talked with them in detail, but they avoided the fact that having a gutter and curb system that would do. So obviously MDOT doesn't want to have to pay, and I'm not speaking for them, but they obviously want to pay for gutter and curb on the whole M119. So they prefer us not to do any trimming because any removal for them, that would pass the liability on to the city as opposed to having. But I haven't talked to them further in detail about what could happen.
Well, and this is from MDOT.
Yep.
And it says, the last paragraph says, in summary, we ask the city of Harbor Springs pass an ordinance to not remove or trim vegetation and trees along M119 Bluff. In addition, we ask you to help educate the residents along the bluff of the impacts of creating unstabilized soils and liability of impacts that may be present. And that's from MDOT.
Joe Smike from 520 Bluff, West Bluff. The city does have an issue here. You've got roadways that you need to protect. You've got residences above and below the bluff that also need to be protected. Lastly, there's the views, not just for the residents, but also the tourists. We do bring in business this way through lots of people coming through that area. A certified arborist has created a management plan which is consistent with our ecology that will prevent erosion. And he has also warned that not doing anything will likely lead to less stability because of invasive species. So you've got an issue here, you just can't sit on it. It's clear this ban should be continued. Just last month, we had a blowout at the section of the bluff. And, we have got to be careful. We've got to look at that. The bluff has been stable for quite a long time, hundreds of years. And to Spike's comment about MDOT, there has never been a need to survey the bluff. It's never been surveyed. We checked with the Gaylord office, and they've never ever done a survey because they haven't needed one. The road has been pretty stable. The city has ordinances maintaining, requiring the maintenance of property, grass cutting, other things which are property. Clearly, the maintenance of the bluff hillside has an impact behind each individual owner's property. So this is a civic interest and is an interest to the entire community, and it's not something that can be pushed off. We've already got a plan in place that we need to get rolling again and keep moving, or we're going to have a problem.
Thank you.
Jill Whalen, I live more at the Ann Street part. So I'm the second to the last house. And when I moved in, I did have to water my lawn, and now I cannot walk up the bluff without going in almost mid-calf. So talking about landscaping that part of the bluff is not going to work. And I don't know about the rest of the bluff. It's probably all different as you go along. But that part of the bluff is incredibly wet. And it's all cattails. And a lot of the trees have died, but a lot of these, as you say, invasive species or volunteers or whatever, they grow up. But I cannot imagine deciding, this would be a really great tree to plant on the bluff, because it's just going to die. So that's where I stand. So.
Kathy Schuff, 520 West Bluff. I echo the sentiments of what Jerry and Joe and Sam have all spoke to. One of the concerns that I do have is that residents are voluntarily going over and planting in the right way. 2 doors down from me, one of the residents planted lilacs, which have become quite a hedge. It's an invasive species. It's becoming a real problem. I talked to Andy at the MDOT Gaylord office, both on the phone and in person. He came out and was doing some work in January of 2019. And he said they're definitely in the right of way. No one should be doing anything to alter the landscape over there. And yet it continues to happen. Just want to bring that to the city's attention.
I just follow that up with that. That's not our right of way, so we're not responsible for maintaining what gets planted into the state right away. If the state wants to, they should, but.
What is that right away from the center, 30 feet in?
33, I believe. I'm not sure exactly.
33 feet.
Side to center line. Yeah.
Jerry, the Fountain, 320 West Bluff. Based on your conversations, the city does not own it. That impacts us, my house, 100%. But going back to what I have done in the past with the city, when I first moved here, I've been here now 8 years. We had a plan, we had an arborist. We had a 4-year cut plan that we took 20% or 15%. And we got, I believe it was 4 years, we got 3 years done, and then the council put on a moratorium. What it did for our part of the bluff where we are is it is very stable. You don't get any water off. The dead trees were taken care of, the invasive trees were taken care of. And if you ask Timberwolf, he will probably tell you that that is probably a more stable position than it was 5 years ago. So if you're looking for the future, just not to worry about cutting a tree down or doing this. If you want a stable bluff, or you want a place that's not gonna have any problems, then you should listen to the people that you hire. Like if you build a street and a guy has something down there and he does something wrong, you're not gonna tell him, you can't use that piece of equipment. You hired a guy, let him do his job. That's all I'm asking. And what he did for us was a good job for the city.
I agree that we had a great plan in place, but this new information has changed the situation. We don't control that land.
No, I'm out of it now, but you've got that other piece from Ann Street going the other way where Bluff Park is. And I don't know why you didn't include that along with your Shade Drive and
This spot right
the other
here.
little piece. I mean, that's not a basic.
There's no controversy on that.
There's no controversy there. The only controversy is where we are.
Right.
Those two pieces that we don't own. And I think you should allow those neighbors over there, to allow them to do what you're doing at the Shade Draw or the other place. They're not, continue the policy you had. You hired these people. I paid thousands of dollars. I paid for 2 surveys on this Bluff Park for the city.
I understand.
And I see that you don't own it, but the part you do own, you should probably take care of your residents and follow your forefathers. They said they wanted views, they wanted the city of Harbor Springs to be seen.
You're out of time, sir.
Master panel, Jack Trouble, 466 Oh, boy. I'm gonna try to stay calm here. So anyway, Ann Street to the west, that should be treated the same as Shade Drive. I don't know why you guys, somebody should put that forward and take a vote on that tonight. And there's no reason why you cannot continue to work with the master plan, work with an arborist, and do controlled cutting. Now, to the 4th Street people, if they own that damn piece of property, Bluff Park, then they should just get up and walk out because they own it. The city of Harbor Springs should pay 1 penny to stabilize that bluff.
Thank you.
So can we have a vote to lift the moratorium west of Ann Street on the city-owned property? And what's the position on why that can't be trimmed, controlled trimmed?
Why don't we get all public comment first, and then you guys can.
We had some more public comment. Sir?
Yeah, my name's Glenn Hunter. I live at 400 West Bluff on the corner of Ann. And my view in front of me is on the public side, the property you own. My question was, I'm in support of all my neighbors on West Bluff and hope we can come to a equitable solution for the people on Bluff Park. But for Kathy and myself, why can't you lift the moratorium going west? There's no reason if you're going to do it for shade. We have an association. We bought the property 20 years ago. We owned it and been full-time residents for 7. And I own a business in town for the last 7 years. When we bought it, MDOT cleared it every year. It's 33 feet from the center line with brush cut, and it stopped. And then a group of us along West Bluff there would chip in money and hire people to maintain it and clear it, but that has since stopped. But I don't understand why you can't lift the moratorium now, so we could go back to doing that.
The moratorium was for property that the city owned. The city doesn't own.
No, I'm talking about the portion that.
They're talking about the park.
Oh,
We're talking about this part. And we,
You do own it.
well, it's technically is listed as a park, but you're allowed to cut trees on it. It just can't be developed with commercial or any kind of building. So
There's not that many trees on it, it's more the scrub brush.
all right, I understand. I don't think. All right. Let's do it quick.
Dave McVicker of Pleasant View Environmental Design and Planning. A lot of that parcel that the state does own, the city does own, a lot of the view aspect is probably more the trees farther below. Now, I get the whole point about the whole feel of Harbor Springs is for the vistas and views. There's plenty of vistas and views throughout the area to go around. You don't have to use that one section of bluff that you don't have an unobstructed view. It's not gonna hurt the rest of the view as you go farther down the bluff, and then you get more view. It's kind of nice having a broke up view of the woods, the forest, northern Michigan. Northern Michigan isn't just a view of Little Traverse Bay. So I'm just saying that to jeopardize the use of a bluff doesn't make a lot of sense environmentally speaking for a couple little sections where you'll have a view on that side of it and a view on that side of it. Doesn't need to have all view everywhere. And the stability of the bluff and the environmental impacts of hydrostatic pressure that creates behind there, you never know if it's going to be 10 years from now or another 80 years from now that thing might puke out like it has farther north of here.
Ann Phillips at 534 West Bluff. I've lived on the bluff for a total of 74 years. And I have seen, back in 64 when I would walk to school, you could see down to the post office. And you can't do any of that now. And when you, at 534, that's on the 5th block going west. It's just, I think most of the problem in those two blocks is just the state right away. They have, people have put lilacs there and they don't take care of them, they don't trim them down. And if we just went out from the center of the road, 31 feet, it would probably solve just about all of our problems. So there aren't really many trees that would have to be cut down. There's a couple of them that are dead that would be nice to have them down. But other than that, if anybody just walks those two blocks, you have a view. The couple of trees that are there have been trimmed up, so you have a canopy. And other than that, it's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's just the state right away there. If we could just trim those or take those bushes down. And 2 years from then, they'll probably be growing back up again, and we could cut them down again. But we don't have any erosion problems anyplace there.
Thank you.
Kate Flavin, 230 West Bluff, purchased my home in 1987. But before we purchased it, we asked, how do you take care of the bluff? And they said, go down and talk to the city manager, which was Fred Bruder at that time. So we came down here, talked to Fred. The bluff was trimmed down to the guardrail. The trees were up with the canopy, but the box elder and all the junk was taken out by Alan Jim's tree service. We talked to Fred and he said, that's what we do. We oversee it, we're the city. However, you can trim it and keep it nice along with the neighbors along there that were doing it. So we purchased our house and we started to do that in 1987. And we did it probably every 3 or 4 years, because that's how long it takes to grow before it gets in the vision, the box elder and all the junk. And then all of a sudden, Fred drove up one day when it had been approved to be trimmed, and he said, whoa, we gotta stop. The people down on 4th Street are up in the air about the trimming of the bluff. Okay, city council, that was 18 years ago. And I'm still waiting to see what's gonna happen with the trimming of the bluff. And we've all been patient. I've seen 3 surveys done over the years. Everybody comes up with the same result. Healthy trees, no erosion, everyone happy. And our community, not just Cape Flaven, but our entire community gets to have the view of driving on that state road up through the tunnel of trees. Or as you all know, when you're coming back from Goodhart and you're driving into our city, it's an unbelievable view. And it was always like that, but it's not like that anymore. And for me, that's very sad.
Anyone else?
I'd like to make a comment if I can. The audio is terrible.
All right, go ahead, state your name and address, please.
Andrew Pappas, 130 West Bluff, and I'd like to second what Ms. Blavens just said. Every word of what she said is the truth. When I bought the house, it was Fred Gruder as the city manager. Then it became Tom Richards, and you had a very good plan that was working very well. But you don't understand, some of you people need to understand is the health of the bluff is, it needs to be maintained. If you think ignoring that area is doing that ecosystem a world of good, you're under a misconception. That's not me talking, that's arborists telling you that. Now, I understand that the tunnel of trees is a nice place to drive, but since I've lived there now, the tunnel of trees starts at State Street. If I wanted to move to Bel Air, Michigan, I would have bought a house in Bel Air, Michigan. But when I bought that house, I did go downtown, and I asked the manager the very same question that Ms. Flavens just expressed. And that was the information we were given at that time. Now, if you guys, we've been very patient. My neighbor Scotty Lancel applied for a tree trimming permit 2 years ago and finally got an answer this year. It was denied. And I gotta tell you, if you're asking for a lawsuit, you're going down that road because we were given bad information by the city employees when we purchased that property. I do appreciate you trying to rectify the situation, but let's do something, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Was that Scott?
No,
it's Andrew.
Andrew? I have to third what Andrew said and what Kay, and I think most of us are trying to say that you hired professionals to move off. There was a plan in place. We had the opportunity to take advantage of it and pay for it, and happy to do so, and still protect the bluff and make it more beautiful as a responsibility of the residents of Harbor Springs. And we were able to carry it out for 3 of the 4 years that it was a 4-year plan. So I totally third this motion that it's a plan, it is in place. No one's talking of cutting trees. We're talking of taking up the scrub, the brush, which weakens the roots of a large tree. And if there's any tree trimming, it's canopying very carefully according to what the arborists who you've hired, that you obviously respect, and having worked with them, we do too, that we continue to be allowed to keep it trimmed. It'd be like all of us having a lawn and a storm comes and there are all these dead limbs and scrub growing up and you're not allowed to touch it. I mean, nature requires some maintenance, especially with the winds in the winters. And that's all we're trying to do here is clean it up. And we're willing to pay for it. We're not asking we're not asking anyone to do anything, except we would like the opportunity as owners and residents to continue the plan that was put in motion. Thank you.
I'd like to just very quickly go back to the first statement that I made as we started, which is, and I'm gonna sort of piggyback on what was said over the phone. I'm not arguing with you that the city doesn't own Bluff Park, but what I'm saying to you is I don't support, based on what I heard opinions, but no one has definitively said that the people on 4th Street and 3rd Street own Bluff Park. And what I'm saying to you is, I think the city, before you make some decision to go a direction of saying they own it and they have right to it, I'm suggesting that you do the homework to make sure that that's true. Because again, what I read is opinion, Victor. It's not specifically, we have facts and we can go back to 1881 or whatever the date was and go back and trace in time and say, this is the owner. And to me, that becomes the key issue, because if you don't have ownership of Bluff Park, now it becomes a debate about who does own it, and potentially it does default back to the city. That would be the point I would make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to respond to that, or no? Sure. We have 58 pages here of deed research, a case law that shows not just an opinion, a legal opinion short of going to court and getting a court's order saying something, a legal opinion saying that these people right here in this plat own it, 99.9%. And if you want to hire your own legal counsel to determine something else, to tell us otherwise, that's fine. I would recommend anyone to hire legal counsel. Our legal counsel is saying, this is who owns it. You don't have to agree with that opinion, but until you provide facts, another legal opinion that states otherwise, I cannot go against what our attorney has spent a month and a half here searching through deeds, through case law, and our staff of what we have searched. So this is not an opinion. This is backed by evidence. This is backed by research going back to minutes to the 1880s from council minutes. So I strongly refute the notion that this is just merely an opinion. This is a legally backed opinion. So I will just say that these people own it as far as we are concerned. That's not the answer we went into this looking for. We went into this answer looking to do a bluff management policy. This is what came out. And that's the road that it took. And it's not pleasing for people to hear, but it is the fact that we have to present to you. And I would hire people below the bluff and above the bluff to consult with their own attorneys to see if they can contest what we or prove otherwise.
One last thing though, and I'm going to restate what I said before, which is we do have a public interest in Bluff Park, even if we don't own it. Just as if someone were to dig out that bluff and undermine the road, that's not allowed. The road, that Bluff Park area does need to be managed. And we have a certified arborist, a professional who's working with us saying, if you just let it go completely, it's going to end up weaker than when it started.
He's now, I think, my understanding would be he's working for the people who own Bluff Park.
Right. And I'd also like to say that we do have to move on this. Yeah, I'd like to say that we do need to move on this, so that we just can't let it sit.
We have other comments. We also have comments on YouTube probably.
Yeah. Can we have a vote on Ann Street to the west? Is there anybody?
When we get through public comment.
Pardon me? Oh,
When we
okay.
get through public comment.
Thank you.
We'll take that under vote. Anyone else in the room for public comment? We can move on to the internet and the phone.
Very quickly, again, Wayne Davis.
Mr. Mayor, this is John Wayman.
We got one more in the room, then you're up, John.
They'll be very quick. Victor, if
Yes.
you could get back, you have that picture from my backyard, just so we know what it actually looks like. Look at plants from far ago, and he knows where it is. That's what it looks like after it's been, quote, managed. If you notice, the trees were cut down. The highest one is that far off the ground. The other ones are that far off the ground. So that's bluff management. The other part is we can see right here, that is 119 being held up by a wooden fence post. So we have a fixed structure there being 119 MDOT property, not the city property, that if any management, anything done to change that undermines it. And by the way, there are 20 trees cut down there 2 years ago behind my property. And that was the first slice, so they can come back for the second slice, which I helped stop. And that's the plan, is to take out every single tree there, and that's just wrong. And MDOT agrees.
John, you're up.
On this particular issue, this is an issue that's been plaguing city councils forever. From the East Bluff perspective, I think we would want zoning, some reasonable vegetation management plan to keep the people on above the bluff happy and keep the people below the bluff happy. And if that were to take place on the east and west bluff, future city councils would not have to worry about it anymore. That's the only comment I've got on bluff on this issue. And I was on YouTube before and tried to make a comment during the public session. But once you get done with the bluff, I'd like to make a brief comment as well.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else on the phone for public comment?
You can press the button.
We have a number of YouTube comments. First, George Pete thanks us for the in-depth research on this. We've got John Parlow, who has mentioned that it's hard to hear council members and asking if they can speak up a little bit. Let's see. George Pete feels that it's best to leave the moratorium in place until the Bluff Park owners can come up with a plan. Ideally, we could manage this thing as one piece, create some harmony in the aesthetics and avoid more fragmentation. Actually, Bill Mulder, that's, I believe, Diane, his wife. Dana, I'm sorry, thank you. Agrees that the moratorium should be left in place while this is sorted out. John Parlow disagrees that the issues with the west with adjacent property owners are different than when only roads about the property below. Dana responds, the bluff management affects a greater area in the city and thus a greater public good. City should oversee that for sure. I'm not so sure who RHECB is. There are owners below the bluff that are deliberately damaging the view without regard to the city or residents. George Pete, before prior comments, please add that he, not keeping up on that. And then we have John Wayman, who was present on YouTube, and just basically requesting that he be able to make a comment. Dana Mulder again, are we still discussing multidisciplinary study that includes analysis, hydrologist, and soil science and geologists, and not just one arborist? John Wayman. Okay, this is just him asking for the comment. We cannot rely on the view of one arborist. John Wayman again, on the bluff issue, it controls building on the bluff. It can control vegetation, not only on the west bluff, but east. It would end endless disputes. He still would want to make another comment. I think he made that before here. Is the current speaker will to cut my property tax? I'm not sure what that means. Willing. I'm not sure who that's.
His name is Russell Coibert, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm not doing a great job on these here. Oh, yeah. Russell Coibert lives in East Bluff. It concurs with William Mulder that the soil scientist's civil engineer's opinion would be more value than an arborist. George Pete, we are on not in 1964 anymore. Dana Mulder, the people on West Bluff should consider the consequences of bluff failure lawsuits to the city that gets spread over the city. If the bluff fails and 119 gets moved over onto their property, city view ordinance would be a good solution. Sorry.
It's a lot. So,
sorry.
That was a mouthful. All right, guys.
So
Comment?
close the public session?
No,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I think.
Close public session, public comment session?
So what do you think about getting another person in here, getting a second opinion on the bluff, another arborist?
If we don't own the property,
Well, I think it's been, so, too.
what difference does it make? Honestly.
You see?
When it comes to viewpoint, we've always assumed that the city owns it, we maintain it. We don't own it. So then it becomes a legal issue with people below the hill in that plot. And that's a hell of a plot, ain't just the people that border the property. I mean, they'd have a say, but, I mean, everybody has a say. And what is it, 50 people there or more?
Way more.
MDOT, you got, what, 8-10 feet on the side of the road, so like the county does, bring one of the brush cutters down through there, trim it, take care of 60-70% of it maybe. That's not our problem. It becomes a legal battle between the upper and lower again, which has nothing to do with us. And that eliminates all of our headaches here. We can lift the moratorium and deal with whatever plan is already in place for the rest of the management process. Then it's a legal battle between the people, upper and lower. It has nothing to do with us. We don't have to deal with this anymore. I'm getting tired of people telling me how a brush and tree grows and how you plant. I'm over that. So my opinion is lift the moratorium. We have nothing to do with bluff. Keep our current
And
plan.
it shouldn't have had it on there in the first place, because it's not ours.
Keep our current plan in place. It can be tweaked as needed.
Well, John, I'll just second that. It's not for us to make that decision at this point. We have to take it off there and let them deal. The lower bluff has to figure it all out. The upper bluff has to fight for it, and that's it. It's not our piece.
Yeah, I don't think we can impose
A moratorium on something that we don't own.
bluff management plan on Bluff Park at this time. I'd like to make a motion that we lift the moratorium on tree cutting west of Ann Street on the city-owned property. So it would be the far section that the city does own.
This parcel here, 200-79? Yep.
I'd second that. There's no homes below it, it's swampland. It's done within the city management plan. There's no issue there.
Right, add to that motion that we carry on with the bluff management plan that's in place.
So we're lifting the motion is to lift the moratorium on that parcel.
Well, basically, we've already lifted the moratorium on the other pieces.
So all publicly owned parcels. So just lift the moratorium. Continue with the policy that we have.
So stop the project at the tree board to develop any kind of management policy and revert to have the tree board stop developing a management plan and revert to cutting, trimming, maintenance by individual request.
That's what I'm hearing.
Just want to be clear.
I have a motion and I do have a second. C.C. Johnson. Excuse me, could we,
Public comment is done. Sorry.
Yes, the motion was made by Mayor Guerra, seconded by Councilman Cops, to remove the moratorium on the western parcel 200-079 and continue with the plan that is already in place for bluff management, vegetation management.
that is the motion. And then Councilman Leo just clarified.
Yes, on the motion.
Curtis. Yes. John Cox.
Yes.
John Leo.
No.
And Matt Bagheera.
Yes.
Motion carried.
And I don't think there's any further action at this time on the Bluff Park that we can do. Suggest that you get legal counsel, and determine who is the actual owner. And at that time, you can bring it back to council and we'll take a look at it.
Understood.
All right, thank you.
All right,
Okay.
we will move on to our next agenda item, which is, and if anyone that wants to filter out before,
Mr. Mayor, at this point, can I say something?
it's up to you, Mayor. It's
I
your,
was on YouTube and tried to make a comment, and didn't get through for some reason.
Is that about the, what's it about?
It's about COVID enforcement and the absence of
Why don't you wait till the end of the meeting? We've only got a couple more items.
You're no longer there.
I probably should.
Yeah, you notify them, tell them that it's over. And then maybe that would be a situation they feel that gets in trouble, that we can maybe come together.
You guys will work together. Yeah, I think that'd be best.
Thank you very much, Council.
We could draft some type of a letter to send out to all parties.
Victor, I don't know if it's something we can read, or just reach out to him and ask him about coming through there and trimming, or is that up to us to maintain it?
You know, we can talk about that offline. We've had some discussions and they're hesitant a little bit, so. All right, so I think everyone here is here to talk about, we're here to listen about our Zoll Street, Main Street landscaping plan and conceptual discussions. We have Tim Knudsen, are you here, from Beckett and Rader? And I will plug in your presentation. So basically, several months ago, we started this process of trying to design a landscape plan for Zoll Street and Main Street there, where we had the spillway work. And we use in-kind services from Beckett and Rader, and they were working on it, and then COVID hit, so they kind of paused, and now they're back at it. And the plan was to have public sessions and public input. But first, what we wanted to do was come to council with our initial conceptual designs and thoughts. And these are not set in stone by any means. We were just working about with Denny, Tim and I, and even Lucas went out there just to see what could be done with this space from an aesthetics purpose as well as a use purpose. So I'll let Tim, you want to take it over?
I'm Tim Knudsen from Beckett and Rader, Toposky, I'm a landscape architect. I've been with Beckett and Rader about 15 years now, kind of northern Michigan here. Victor and actually Victor originally contacted us early spring to take a look at site plan ideas for the corner of Zoll and Main Street, mainly to improve the aesthetic, to address the spillway / walkway, and maybe generate some purpose to the improvements while we're at it. You may notice in the center of the plan here, the presence of what looks like a dog park. That is a dog park. Again, these are just initial ideas, but the city asked us to also look at the possibility of utilizing that space for a dog park, just to get a sense of whether it would work, how it would fit, what kind of size we could realize, how it would be served and things like that. So I want to talk about the dog park first. Could go to the next slide. This is an enlargement of the dog park, which we've separated into two pens. So those dog parks, if you have the space, it's really helpful to separate it into two pens because then you can be cleaning one close it down, have the other one open for use. When they're not being cleaned, you can separate, in this case, small dogs versus large dogs, or you can even separate, socially introverted or less friendly dogs from more friendly dogs. We have a small dog pen here, it's about 1/5 of an acre, and a large dog pen there, it's about 1/3 of an acre. Ideally, we like to get 1/2 to an acre to a dog pen, but the space just doesn't exist here, and we wouldn't recommend enlarging the space, in this direction, because then we really get into public view in front of City Hall. We're trying to keep from encroaching on the slope here because we just foresee a lot of maintenance problems when the grade is wet and you have dogs and people running up and down the slope. So we're really trying to maximize the space here, but what we're looking at is a 4-foot fenced area, which is this dashed line, 4-foot fence section in the middle, and then I guess a version of a prison sally port. So one dog and dog owner can be going in, while the other dog owner is going out, and we minimize conflicts. To get into the small dog pen, we're carving out a number of parking spaces here. It would be accessible from the roadway, but this makes it universally accessible. A lot of times you can set yourselves up for being in a favorable grant position by trying to meet universal accessibility to the degree you can. So that's the purpose of this parking lot, is to get people in and out of the small dog pen. And then to get people into the large dog pen, we're recommending just adding sidewalk to the existing parking, a small plaza area, and a gated entrance up in that corner. And then we do have maintenance gates. So getting inside the facility for cleaning, for mowing, obviously we need a larger gate than a 3-foot swing gate. We're showing a maintenance gate here and a maintenance gate on the top right-hand corner there. At each entrance, there is a dog waste compost bin. This is a kind of an anecdotal, neat story, but this dog park in, I want to say it was outside of Seattle, that had people depositing their dog waste, composting. They ended up turning it into a profit of using it to help fund cleanup of the dog park. So people were actually lining up to get recycled dog poop, put it in their gardens to grow their vegetables. And there's value to doing so. And then we would have water service, but we would also want to place a water cistern at each dog pen, so dogs always have water available. Any questions on this layout or this plan? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're taking away all the area that the high school band practices for football games before they go in and play at the games. They go out there and warm up. They've done that forever. You're taking it all the way to put dogs in.
John, this is just a proposal, conceptual. It's not for sure, but it's a good comment. Though I noticed I think one of the reasons we went to dog park was that was one of the most commonly things requested in our public survey when we asked what people want to see in our Parks and Rec system. And so that's why this idea came to be. So.
Dog parks can be a challenge because the community seems to want them until you talk about locating them, and then there seems to be a little bit of hesitation. I understand what John's saying, and that's a pretty important function that the space serves. Looking at the space in a vacuum, though, it's really not bordered by residences right next to it. You've got a buffer from the residences on this side, from the municipal architecture, and then obviously the roadway on the north side. So it does kind of lend itself to this kind of use. Our big concern was how this would appear from the roadway. So, but I think you'll notice if you're coming up the hill, if you're going up the hill out of town, eastbound, you really don't have a lot of time to make that glance into the space, and your elevation rises so quickly that you don't tend to pick up a whole lot. Coming into town, I tend to believe you'd see it a little more. We would recommend fencing this in an aluminum picket fence, an ornamental fence, as opposed to a chain link fence. It's going to be, more unsightly for that reason. And then we've done some things in the landscape site plan to the east that would also help bring down the visual impact of that dog park.
Is that where we're at now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we can scroll back out. There you go, we got it. So we are right here. Full Street on the left-hand side, and then Main Street on the top of the sheet, and then our existing walkway. One of the things we noticed, and I'll show you some ground level photographs in a couple minutes, is that when you're coming into town and when you're leaving town, your eye just goes to that walkway right now, particularly when you're coming into town. It's just a case of a broad stretch of very light colored material in the middle of the lawn. It's something that didn't exist there before. I know I picked it up and tend to look at it when I didn't used to look that way. So it already kind of starts to draw your view. Is it positive? Is that negative? Are things we can use to build off that effect? Well, that's kind of what we try to do here. So staying on this slide, if you're coming down the top of the hill, this walkway kind of starts to direct your attention to City Hall because of the form of it. So what we thought we would do for a concept is to enhance that form with landscaping. So the larger green circles would be small canopies trees, not large canopy trees, small canopy trees, or large flowering trees. Those would border the outside edge of the ramp, build off of that form, which I'll show you in a minute, and also start to create a separate space here that kind of isolates itself and buffers itself from the roadways, which is a good thing. We looked at maybe placing the bulk of the vegetation on this side, but what it did in that case is it actually made this walkway feel like more a part of the intersection and not less a part of the intersection. So we've got a row of shade trees on this side of the ramp, some understory shrubs kind of against the ramp, some larger flowering shrubs here, and then on this side of the ramp, some smaller flowering shrubs. And what the cross hatching is would be perennials and native grasses. Now, we looked at one last element on this when we talked about relocating the City Hall sign, which is right here, which we're recommending to place there. And that's whether or not City Hall and Harbor Springs merits or needs or deserves a larger sign for sense of arrival. We kind of tell you this is where City Hall complex is, and so forth. So the idea we came up with is this circular form, which would be a low concrete wall, low masonry wall, match the architecture of the buildings, with some boulder accents on either side, and with the text Harbor Springs or City of Harbor Springs placed on the face of that wall. So there are some challenges to doing so. Number one, most people come into town this way, and it's really difficult, if not impossible, to position the wall that way. Number two, we want to keep it outside of road rights of way, which are 66 feet for both roadways. It looks like this right of way might be offset a little bit, so we favored it this way a little bit more. The last challenge is the grade tends to go down more in this area than here, but it does tend to drop down a little bit, which you'll see in the elevation that we prepared to kind of give you a sense of this from ground view. So it's an idea. Again, this is all conceptual, just kind of showing this to everybody here for your first impressions and guidance and so forth.
Next slide.
To make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh. Lastly, we would recommend placing pedestrian bollard lights, again, along the inside of that walk, not this side. And the added reason why we keep them on this side is to keep from interfering with vehicular traffic. We think we could probably do something relatively inexpensive with a solar light. It doesn't have to run all night. Understand that infrastructure is rather limited on that side, so it might be a good opportunity to place something that doesn't take a lot of infrastructure investment. Okay, if we can go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Okay, so this is our view coming down the hill on Main into town, and you can see what I'm talking about when you see the sweep of that ramp. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is leaving town, eastbound on Main Street, and again, your eye starts to pick up that ramp and that wall, and you can see how the grade pitches. It looks like it pitches pretty steeply here, but it's a little deceiving because it breaks a lot more here, and then as you get closer to the ramp, it's relatively flat. So we didn't think the low wall would work because of the grades. We would have left it out, but we thought, based on what you guys think, it's worth pursuing. Now let's go to the next slide. Well, this is just a quick sketch. I like doing them because people understand ground view much better than plan view. But this will be driving into town on Main Street. Again, you see a little glimpse of that ramp, not nearly as much of it. But what we do see is this landscape forming a sight line, kind of direct your view both around this curve, and I guess using the edge of this ramp here down Zoll Street into the City Hall complex. Now, tried to show the impact of that wall visually here, and that's about all you would see coming down the hill. So it's enough to tell you that there's something there visually, something important that you want to see, but it'll be difficult to sign that. City of Harbor Springs, for example, and see it coming down Main Street. And
So if I could, Tim, just to make that clear, because this is really a cool concept, is on that little wall right there, it'd be stamped in the concrete, welcome to Harbor Springs. That'd be really cool.
Welcome to Harbor Springs or just the city name?
It could be whatever.
yeah, it could be whatever, it could be stamped. We even talked about having it, I don't know how many of you have seen the True North sign where I think the letters are carved out and lit from behind. So that you have this 24-hour-a-day readability of that sign. It could be a mix of concrete and masonry. I think probably doing some masonry might not be a bad idea because it could really help tie it to the architecture here. But just, it seemed like an idea that, based on the reactions of Danny and Victor, deserves some further exploration. We can go to the next slide. That really kind of gives you the best impression. Again, and just a real quick hand sketch here. This would be a curved form of that wall. In this version, I've tried to give it an appearance of masonry with a limestone cap. But it wouldn't necessarily have to be those materials. I just want people to kind of think about the form and scale. So, a couple other nice things that this landscape does. There's a lot going on behind here. If we go back, I don't want you to have to go back to the before image, but if we were to look at that image, a lot of vertical elements. A lot of expanses of pavement and just a lot of space. And so your eye tends to kind of wander into that area. If we go to the aftershot, you can see how that's kind of cleaned up a lot. Something else that I would predict would happen here is if this gets planted and matures like this, the outbound traffic is going to slow down. Anytime you place a vertical form close enough to the road where a driver can perceive it, It's human nature to slow down. You can see it every time you drive 31 and go through Bayview and then back onto 4 lanes. But it slows down there. The speed limits are virtually the same.
And that's been a critical, and Kyle knows, Chief Knight knows that that's been a critical spot where the speed transitions from 30 to 40, where we've had a lot of problems with speeding. So it'd be a benefit, yeah.
So, so yeah, that would be an added benefit of a planning like this. That was about all I had to present. Are there any questions or comments?
Just a small comment, that the top-down site plan didn't look like it's still maintained. There's an existing water fountain there. And I know a lot of people in the community use
Yes.
that frequently. Is that still there, or?
I'm glad you brought that up. That's something I missed. So that is still there. We would keep that there. We may toy with repositioning it and the bench there. But the only change we've shown here is this wall apparently does that now. This seems like it has the potential to be kind of one of those gathering or wandering spaces, especially if this comes to fruition. So the more space we can add there for pedestrians to use that bench, to use the drinking fountain, to stop and linger, the better and safer.
Yeah, and Jeff, not only were we still gonna have it, we were actually gonna enhance it too, so there could be a kiosk there letting them know how to get to that point on bicycle or pedestrian to downtown.
If that's a possibility. So I sit and watch people now in front of my office there. They go up that spillway, but they usually stop, park their bikes, take a sip of water, sit on the bench for a few minutes. So that'd be a good, it wouldn't be a destination spot itself. It'd just be a nice pause spot. We've also talked about with Tim and Denny that necessarily, because it would add a lot more expense, is having this parking here for accessibility. We talked about the possibility of just having the entrance here and having maybe a sidewalk to continue this sidewalk right now instead of, right now it stops and it goes nowhere. And usually in front of City Hall, we always see people, and I know Chief Knight knows this, in front of you, people, when they come from Ottawa Stadium, are walking along the driveway here. It'd be nice to get people off that driveway. That would cut down expenses, of course, but it also would mean we couldn't get grant money easily. And I know you put, Tim, here at the end, some financials.
Yeah.
Some estimates.
Well, again, these are real rough, I guess, high-level estimates. Everything that goes into the dog park, we priced out at about $160,000. Now, that includes design contingency, construction contingency, and general conditions. So what that means in English is that should be the cost to construct it. That should be the final bill.
And we also
chain link fence. If we change from chain link to ornamental aluminum fence, we add about in the range of $20,000. I'm sorry, Victor.
No, I was just going to add that. So this is not to say that this is what we want the city to spend. What we've allocated for the landscape design was more closer to a $30,000 range. And we talked about potentially doing that in phases over years, or if council likes what they see, doing it, spending the $45,000 for that. We talked about potentially, Denny, talking about perhaps setting up a Friends of the Dog Park committee that would manage it and help raise funds for it if there are people that really wanted to have dog park in there. So we're not necessarily saying this is what the city will spend, but this is what it will cost if we want to go down this route of using that space in addition to landscaping.
And I could probably elaborate on that. I mean, you guys know for a while, we've actually needed a dog park. And trying to find a location has been very challenging because people want a dog park, but not in their backyard. And this opportunity here allowed us to use a space that isn't used. It's got ample parking. It's close to Zoll Street Beach. There's a lot of people that are really interested, and I think if we did go forward, we would have some good opportunities to get some donations. And then to look at maintaining it, I mean, if you have a dog park now, you have to do a lot of dog poop to clean up and the weed whipping around it. And some of the other areas where I worked, I put together a friends group, people that are really passionate about it. And we would use them to help not only educate other people, but also help maintain the facility.
I have actually one question, because I don't know anything about dog parks, but who is the city responsible if two dogs get in a fight and one gets hurt? Where's the responsibility fall inside these things?
It's a good question. Usually most places have liability signs or posted, but that would be a question we would consult with Raymer on that. get you a final answer.
Yeah.
It could be a use at your own risk kind of sign like we putting up for the bathrooms, but
You know, dogs played a huge role during the quarantine, getting people outside the law.
Is that walkway gonna be useful? Are they ready to go under the road and out?
that's the goal. The goal is now that we did some repair work, Elmer's came back to level out that concrete there. The goal is for Benchmark is to resubmit our plans to the state for using that as a bike path. So hopefully the state can get on board with that, and then the bike path committee can continue seeking fundraising for that. But we don't know 100% sure yet if that's going to go through. So we're still waiting on that. So all those pieces do need to fit together for this to work out well.
You said that isn't used very much. You ever come in town on the 4th of July? So that place is packed.
Sure. You know, that's one day a year.
And
we're
Memorial Day also. The Native Americans use it for
They're not using it for that anymore. But you're right, the 4th of July, I mean, we have to, adjust to that. Just like I think the band could practice right here in Jean Jordan Park, which would give them a little bit more isolated area, not far away from traffic.
I just can't see the dog park right on the entrance coming into town. We moved the deer park because people didn't like seeing the deer.
Who didn't like seeing deer when you come into town?
Exactly. Years ago.
That's northern Michigan.
The DNR said that.
So I guess to go over that conversation, so we've talked about this other possibilities for dog park. Only two options came. One is Jean Jardine here, but the idea that the residents would see that fence in front of them. It's convenient location-wise because the dog park's at the Zoe Street Beach, but then you have this whole area fenced in, and that would be a challenge. The only other place that has been considered to be a dog park has been where the deer park is right now, and we've been down that road in the past, and they can't go there. So really, I mean, we're limited. If the option is the survey results that we got were dog park was the number one thing people want to see. So this space really can't be used for any other recreational purposes. Maybe we don't have to use it for anything. Maybe it just stays blank and that's fine. But we're just proposing something that can have use and function as well as be aesthetically pleasing. And it's just conceptuals, and we can go whatever direction the council wants us to go. It's just, I don't think, Denny, when we went out there, I've tried to look at different possible recreational opportunities we could use that space for, and it was just very hard to figure out.
What about a community garden?
We've talked about that before. Wouldn't it be?
Then you have flowers and plants.
Is it in our funding to do the landscaping?
Yes.
I think
We put $30,000.
$30,000.
We put $30,000 for this year to do landscaping.
So dog park would be over the top of that, but if he's talking about raising money.
No, I know, but for intensive purposes, it's a nice layout to discuss, but right now I would say let's approve the landscaping and finish out the entranceway here, and then we can further discuss the layout of everything else.
Cooch Park.
So when we go forward then to have public sessions, just talk about the landscape, don't bring up the dog park when we do public input sessions on this? Is that, I just want to make sure, get where you guys are going with that.
I would like to move forward with the landscape portion, but keep the dog park as a conversational piece to figure out, where and what. That's probably not something we can figure out right now, but I'd like to see the landscape.
I really like the landscaping, yellow.
Landscaping.
That's very nice.
Yeah, so that's more of a concern to get that landscape.
And it is
Build a dog park.
and it's more within the range that we have approved. So
I think it's a great concept. Yeah.
Nice work.
Any strong feelings on the wall? Either way, one of the reasons that came about is because we think about moving the city hall sign closer out to the corner, but it's a great sign, but it's the wrong scale for a vehicular sign, when you're going by at 25 or so. Well, then we think about the size of the wall, increased scale, maybe there's some opportunity to place some wayfinding on it in addition to, but it was one of these things that we wanted to include rather than not show on the plan and not even thought of it. So just looking forward.
I think the wall breaks things up.
That's a great concept.
I don't know if we really need signage.
something that just says City Harbor Springs or Harbor Springs or whatever. Yeah. That's
Simple.
Just the name of the city.
But then a kiosk, down there that kind of.
the kiosk would be if the bike path goes that way, I'd assume, if we use the spillway as a bike path, that's when that would come into
That'd be down
play.
by the drinking fountain, it wouldn't
Right.
be up here by the landscape.
If that's something that,
I think that concrete wall would be beautiful there, especially if it was carved to look like stone.
so I don't think we need a motion or anything on this. I think if we have consensus approval, just as, with the landscape part at least, go forward with it. Let's do more in-depth designs and detailed drawings, and then keep the dog park as a conversation piece for the future. But focus really on this.
I'm a little late in the discussion, but when you talk about dog parks, but what's all this grass down here for? You know, we had complaints about, you know, the parades assembling up here and the kids band and that. What's that down here for? It's closer to the dog beach.
Like
Well, that's part of the discussion.
Barry, yeah, that's part of the discussion. That's one of the things we thought about, if we could put the dog park there. It's just, we aren't at that place of where we're gonna put the dog park. We were at the place of what can we use this spot for? So if, that's where we're at with that discussion. But I'm not necessarily opposed. I just feel like you would get more opposition from the homeowners across Zoll Street about using that, having a big fence there as a dog park. But people do use that with their dogs right now. I mean, their dogs.
Landscape, it, you know.
Yeah, they can put up trees to separate, they can make a tree wall out of it.
There could, yes,
That makes logical sense.
I'm open. Just, it's your decision.
Right now, the whole city's a dog park, so why you wanna spend $200,000 to build one?
I was waiting for that comment.
Well,
There's a lot of money.
ahead with the landscaping, and like you said, keep the dog park on the back burner for conversation, see if someone wants to write a check for it. Or part of it.
Okay. All right.
Everyone agree with that? Everyone good?
Do we have any comments related to that on YouTube?
We do have some comments. Dana Mulder has got some comments here about might be a good idea to do a public survey to see if this city of residents would support the city funds being spent on a dog park. The landscaping part looked good. The reality of a dog park is not great. Dog owners yelling at each other, dog fights, so on. John Wayman has a comment. Can't tell if we've had time to review his emails, so he doesn't know about the following. George Pete says that we don't need to fill every space, and that it's not a spot for a dog park, and that he thought that Zoll Street Beach was a dog park. John Wayman responded with, city is responsible for public safety. Its efforts to enforce the mask order is not working. George Pete has another. We don't need more wayfinding or signs. John Wayman has a comment. The virus is spread by talking. It results in death and serious injury. Valerie Hosea has a comment. She does not think that the dog park is a good idea. She does agree that it is, all of Harbor Springs is basically a dog park. That's what we got.
Well,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
So we'll go on, proceed with public input and things related to this, and we'll be back with more plans. So let's go to the city manager's report really quickly before we go to closed session. Not a whole lot. Just remember, elections are tomorrow, primaries here at City Hall. Elmer's completed their concrete work. They still have to come back to do work on the stairs. So we've got some work done there. Governor's new executive order 160 imposes some slightly stricter restrictions on social distancing, which includes a number of people at indoor social gatherings to 10. Gatherings like this at meetings are at 25% capacity of our room. So that's why we put a notice on our agendas now that our capacity is 40 people, because this room has a capacity of 160. So still encouraging everyone to participate remotely when they can. And finally, we're working with the school. I believe Denny is to, in the fall, they will want to have outdoor lunch for their students and they need picnic tables. So I believe we'll be able to provide them with plenty of our picnic tables so their students can have lunch outdoors. So a good use for some of that. And not a whole lot more. There was in this 2-week period, there were no board and commission meetings, but we have DDA, Harbor Commission, Planning Commission coming up in the next 2 weeks. So, and then just, I did go to a Northern Michigan Municipal Managers meeting in Cadillac, and there's several city managers there, and it's good to know that they're doing the similar practices as we are in regards to social distance enforcement and internally at City Hall, how we do operations. We've separated ours into private and public section. So have most other city halls. So that way, anytime we interact with the public, we have our masks on. In our own private space, we don't wear masks. And that's pretty consistent with other city managers' interpretation of what it means that you must wear a mask in an indoor public space. So there's been misconceptions on what that means, but it's indoor public space, not just any indoor space. So I think just some things people remember also with the Executive Order 160, incidental gatherings that aren't intentional, where 6 feet can't be maintained, such as walking on a sidewalk or coworkers passing each other at the office. That is not an enforceable offense or a ticketable offense. It's when you have a planned gathering that includes more than X amount of people outside, if you can't maintain social distancing. That is the governor's order. So I know there's been a lot of concern about, our sidewalks are crowded, and I think we should, and we've talked about, I know I've talked with Margot about potentially putting some more kind of small signage, nothing big, just says, maintain 6 feet. But we're still going to address that and talk about that on how we can go about doing that. But really, we can't really enforce someone that is walking by someone else and they don't have 6 feet. That's not what the governor's order is intended to enforce. But we've been talking about it, and we do have comments from people. So Kyle and I are always talking about how we can improve. So that's where I'm at on that. So.
Victor, we closed the Legion because we couldn't keep people 6 feet apart at the bar.
Yeah.
You take a stool out, somebody would walk up and stand there. So we took and closed the doors until.
Okay, thank you.
Further notice.
All right, Charlie, you still on the phone?
I think that's what's coming.
It's coming, son.
I would guess.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You want me to talk now?
Please. 3 minutes.
I've been bugging you with text or whatever it is. First of all, my comments in connection with the need for enforcement of the COVID order did not reach the minutes of last meeting, and it should have. And I want my comments to reach the minutes this time. The primary role of local government is public safety. And a year ago, we painfully learned what was necessary when your immune system was gone. As some of you may know, we spent 6 months at Fort Hospital last year, and my bride cheated death, thank God. And then the COVID thing comes. A year ago, we were told by doctors, you cannot go near people, social distancing is another word. You can't go into businesses, and you must wear a mask if you're outside. That was the lesson we learned when you don't have an immune system. None of us have an immune system to this virus. The culture in the city of our guests appears to be, 1, not caring, 2, not thinking they might be helpful, and 3, in some instances, antagonistic. My wife won't let me tell you the story that she ran into when she was riding her bike back home on Main Street, when she was confronted with adults blocking the sidewalk when she asked for space. And that's probably all I can say. I'm not going to say anymore. And that got me going. I went downtown and looked downtown. There weren't 80 to 90% of the people wearing masks. It was exactly the opposite. It was probably 10, 20, maybe 30. the only thing that's gonna stop, this virus, stop death, stop business failures, stop lockdowns, is for people in our small community to be convinced that they've got to wear masks. Because if they don't, and I understand there are already community residents who have the virus, it could rip through this community. And I don't know if you've had the time, but I know you folks are busy, especially with the fluff issues and emails and all that kind of stuff, that you're having a chance to read what's going on in small communities like ours. When a mayor said, you'd think with the downside risk, we would have done something. Well, the downside risk up here is here. The virus is here. It's spreading
John,
slowly.
your time's up.
Okay,
All right,
please do something.
all right, thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity.
All right,
Goodbye.
bye.
So I assume, nothing else. I don't think we have anything for boards and commissions. I think next time we have an appointment, I think we need to fill, so I'll get that boards and commission list. There's also a tree board opening. I don't know if you're ready to fill that tonight. Nope, okay. All right, okay. So then I guess if there's no other, any city council new business?
Any new business, old business? No.
So then, Jim, can we have some wording so we can go into closed session?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We would need a motion, and with, from the council person, move that the council need in closed session under section 8E of the Michigan Open Meetings Act to meet with the attorney regarding trial strategy and further litigation.
I'll make that
You could have an estimate of financial effects
Yeah, well.
on the litigation position of the city.
All right, I'll make that motion. Get started.
John Cox.
Yes.
Cece Johnston.
Yeah.
John Leal.
Yes.
Matt Viera.
Yeah.
Mike Turkis. Motion carried. We are in closed session.
All right, I'll stop the, and end the stream. And Jim, I will call you.
Okay, you want to take a break or you just want to?
Yeah, I'll give you a call within a minute.